No, you don't need the.
Legend. He a 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 legend. Welcome to the league. To the league. To the league. To the league. To the league of Iron. Welcome to the league. To the league. To the league. To the league. To the league of Iron.
Pike on money, pike on money, pike on money. We making pike on money. Payday, about to throw a rack on China. Need some.
All right, we don't need to do the whole song in this video. Welcome back. My name is Pikel with League of Items, and in today's video, we're going to talk about the play-ins. We're going to talk about the different groups and the most important matches, and then we're going to talk about the main event. Right before I started this video, I put in a bunch of bets. I put $20 on EG, Fnatic, C9, G2, and Rogue at different odds. And then Damwon and DRX, I put $50 on each of those teams. I might put on a little bit more, but I'll probably just be making bets in individual games for fun. The reason I did that is because I think that Damwon and DRX specifically have, better chances to win this tournament than implied before. And I feel like the way that play-ins played out kind of confirmed some of my thoughts about League right now. So let's talk about the play-in stage. And I'm only going to talk about two games, really. There's a lot that we could talk about. Play-ins was a lot of fun to watch. But really, it came down to the four teams that advanced: Fnatic, EG, DRX, and RNG. Mad Lions, a.k.a. the Sad Lions, crashed out of Worlds. Really not that surprising to me. A lot of people didn't want to believe that they weren't that good, but I think that one of the biggest narratives surrounding them was that they didn't win a best of 5 to get into this position. They kind of just qualified because LEC. And they were pretty weak. Nisqy was always going to be a liability, and I think that we can see that with a bunch of different teams. They have some kind of glaring weaknesses, or at least pressure points that other teams can exploit. So first, let's talk about Fnatic against Evil Geniuses. Obviously, EG does not have Danny, and that is pretty important in a matchup against a team like Fnatic, because I don't think that EG without Danny is much better than Fnatic. I think that if you take a look at this draft specifically, the Kate Lux in the bot lane was a bad decision. The Renekton was a bad decision. Victor against Sylas, it's a pretty common kind of toss-up. The Victor is going to be more impactful in the late game for the most part. Like, Sylas can steal an ultimate and be really huge. But, for the most part, I think Fnatic just won this game in the draft. I've had problems with EG drafting all year. I think their coach is subpar at best. He's not going to be with the team next year. I think that'll ultimately be a benefit for them. Hopefully Danny comes back by that point. I don't think that EG is going to do much during the group stage. They were put into the group with Damwon, G2, and JDG, so that's obviously a very difficult group. I think that Damwon and JDG are much better than Evil Geniuses, and I think that Evil Geniuses are pretty even with G2. We'll talk about the matchups a little further later on in this video. Fnatic, I think Fnatic looked okay. Not really anything special. I know that a lot of people like them much more than I do. I'm just never going to agree with you on that. I think that Humanoid is definitely very overrated. I think that this is not going to be a good meta for them. Razork is not going to be able to carry them against the best teams in the world. Humanoid is not going to be able to carry them against the best teams in the world. And Upset is not going to be able to carry them against the best teams in the world. My read on the meta kind of eliminates a team like Fnatic just like right off the bat. Because in order for them to have the best chance, it really needs to be a hyper carry meta where Upset can be better and get drafted around and played around, because Humanoid is really somebody who wants to move into the side lanes and help assist somebody else. He's really not the focal point of a good team. If he is the focal point, the team is not good, is kind of what I'm trying to say. I think they will have Hylissang back. Wonder is a good but not great top laner. He'll get beat up by the better top laners in this tournament. One bet that I was on for the play-in stage was DRX winning their group, and they did. I think that a lot of people didn't see that as like a real outcome. But my read on this team, I think, is pretty accurate. I think that they're much better when Pyosik is the jungler. I think the champion pools are slightly different, and I think they're just trying to get both of them stage time. I think that Pyosik might have military service next year, so they want to have Juhan ready for when he's gone. In this matchup, I mean, I do like RNG a decent amount. It was surprising to see them lose a game to DFM. But, this game, I don't think this game is indicative of DRX being much better than RNG, but it shows that they can compete with a team like RNG. Obviously, in this one, you see a very good draft coming from DRX. I think that they were ahead of the meta. So, Aatrox, strong champion right now. It allows the top laners to express themselves over other top laners. Kingen is a good but not great top laner. I think Breathe is much better. The one problem with a team like RNG is that they'll just let Breathe pick Jax a bunch, which I'm not a huge fan of Jax. Yes, there are spots where he can carry the game, but it just looks like a liability more often than not. In the jungle, we have Maokai. Maokai ended up being extremely popular during the play-in stage. It's a very good champion. I actually play a lot of Maokai and Maokai jungle before it was kind of buffed to this level. I played it a couple years ago, and it's kind of for the same reasons. Once they changed his ultimate, it's a really good zoning ultimate. It's really good in a hyper carry meta to help support your hyper carry, but then also in a utility AD carry meta, there will be points where the Maokai is just way too strong and the utility AD carries can't successfully deal with it, or reliably deal with it, I should say. In the mid lane, we had Akali against LeBlanc, but more importantly, Zika against Xiaohu. I think that Zika is more of a selfish mid laner, which can put him into good spots against players like Xiaohu. Everybody knows that Xiaohu's a very good player. I think by the end of this tournament, everyone will know that Zika is a very good player as well. Then we had Tristana in the bot lane. Tristana has a really good win rate right now, and that's an exciting pick for the main event because it's a very explosive champion. I didn't mean for that to be a pun, but Tristana is a very good playmaking AD carry. So if a playmaking AD carry can kind of she is more of a hyper carry, but she's a little bit more aggressive, so it's kind of in between the utilities and hyper carries. I think that puts players like Viper, Ruler at the forefront for the importance of AD carries at this tournament. Overall, I think DRX kind of performed how I expected them to. RNG performed how I expected them to. This one game isn't the end of the world for RNG. I still have high hopes for them in the future. So let's talk about my read on the meta real quick, and then we're going to talk about the individual groups and who I think will advance from the groups, or at least who has a good chance to. So in the top lane, I think it's really important to understand drafts are going to be determined by which top laner is stronger, and which top laner is stronger is going to come down to can they play the Aatrox and can they play the counters to Aatrox? Because if you can play the Aatrox and the opponent cannot play Fiora, then the other team's kind of screwed. So if you have the better carry top laner, that's very important. So carry top laners are something that we want to see from our teams. In the jungle, it comes down to should they pick Maokai? Obviously, anybody can pick Maokai. All you have to do is click 2 buttons. But should they? Does it fit in with their team composition? Meaning their players, the players that they have on the team, not the champions that they're drafting. I think that the pick is an advantage for weaker teams, which was mentioned on Cast today. You see one of the big impacts is that Maokai's zoning ultimate can be very limiting for the other team. And then also, if you have a team with a carry jungler, you don't want to pick Maokai because one of the ways that you're creating a difference is by putting your jungler on something that can utilize a lot of resources. So it'll be interesting to see how teams kind of play around that. I think some teams are good enough where their jungler, although they might be a very good carry jungler, it might make more sense for them to ban it, play around the carries. And then you'll have other teams that are like, yes, we have a very good jungler, but our AD carry is even better, so let's play around our AD carry. Then they would be picking Maokai more often. In the mid lane, it comes down to, is the mid laner a carry player where they're going to be selfish, or are they a roamer where they want to help out the side lanes, like want to help out the Aatrox in the top lane? Do they want to help out their jungler if they have like a Bel'Veth or a Graves or something like that? Or do they want to go to the bot lane and try to snowball their lead in the bot lane? Then in the bot lane, we have utilities or hyper carries. I think that most AD carries kind of fit into one of those playstyles better, and the team compositions, again, kind of force teams in that direction. Like if you know that you're, like if you're Evil Geniuses and you have Kaori, and you're going up against like EDG in the knockout round, like you don't want to play a hyper carry against a hyper carry because Viper is going to be better than you at that. So you want to kind of play the more aggressive side of the matchup. Like don't go into like the whole Renekton and picking like bad champions and stuff, or at least champions that like completely fall off the face of the earth. But you'll probably want to take that utility side because at least he'll be providing something to the team in the event that he gets stomped out by Viper. And then for supports, you have your engaged supports, your enchanter supports, and the supports that have a million pocket picks. So we'll go through a bunch of the different teams and kind of talk about that real quick. So in Group A, we have Cloud9, EDG, Fnatic, and T1. I think that from the top lane perspective, I think that Zeus is probably the best top laner, but not by much. And I think that Zeus, Flandre, and Fudge will all have really good matchups in the top lane. Wonder is kind of going to be a liability for Fnatic unless they completely distort their pick bans around him. He'll most likely be playing like the passive side of matchups, trying to outscale the enemy team, or just picking something like Ornn to help his team. Is it possible that he picks a carry into a carry? Yes, but he really shouldn't in these matchups. I think that the other teams have the advantage over them. I think that in the jungle, Cloud9 should not pick Maokai. I think that Blabber really needs to be given more resources to stand up against these other junglers, and I think that he would do well in a lot of those matchups. So C9 should be banning Maokai. EDG, it doesn't matter if they're playing Jai Jai or Junjia. I think that they will want to play something like Maokai because you want to get as much resources onto Scout and Viper as possible. So they should probably be picking Maokai. Fnatic, I would say you probably should not be picking Maokai because then you'll have like a passive top laner and then a gank heavy jungler where you're not going to have a lot of tempo. So it's probably not a great idea. I don't love Razork in any of these matchups really. And then for T1, they can kind of do whatever they want just from a talent perspective. I don't think that it's likely they'll be playing a ton of Maokai. So I would expect them to ban it and then pick things like Viego. I think Owner had a good Viego throughout the last year and a half, 2 years. So for Group A, I think that T1 is really the wild card here. I think that obviously EDG is capable of performing well at a world championship. They are the current world champions. But I just don't love this meta for them. In order for this to be a meta that EDG will really shine, it would have to get like Jinx and Aphelios back in. I just don't love this spot for EDG. I really do think that Cloud9 has chances to get out of this group. I think that Cloud9 against Fnatic will ultimately be stylistically beneficial for Cloud9. So I would consider betting on Cloud9 to make it out of the group. And I have money on them to win because I just wanted to throw $20 on them. It's a hedge against my Damwon and DRX because I think that there's a good chance that Cloud9 or Fnatic, really Cloud9. I think that Cloud9 has a chance to get out of this group. And if they get out of this group, kind of all bets are off. If I had to pick a team to win this group, I'd pick T1. That's about it. I think that T1 is the strongest here. I was really high on EDG going into Worlds last year. They're not playing at the same level as they were last year, and I really don't think this meta is great for them, but they're a good enough team where they could completely prove me wrong, or the meta could move in their direction, but that's really what it's going to require for me to be high on them. Let's move on to Group B. In Group B, Damwon, Evil Geniuses, G2, and JDG. We've already talked about EG, but I think that Impact can play Aatrox, but I don't love playing high variance champions against Nuguri, Broken Blade, or 369. That might kind of force EG back into playing more of a passive top lane, but now that they have Kaori, they might say, if Impact can't win this matchup, we're not going to win this game anyways. So, he can play Aatrox. We've seen him play Aatrox throughout the play-in stage. Jungle, should they pick Maokai for Inspired? Personally, I really don't think so. He did have very good performances on the Maokai, but it was against lesser competition. And I think that if the draft gets into such a spot where they can get everything they need for their team compositions plus get a Maokai, then that'd be interesting. I think that in the mid lane, JoJo's had a really good play-in stage. Kaori kind of scares me, and Vulcan kind of scares me a little bit. I really cannot stand their drafting, where they're playing things like Renekton and then Kate Lux. I think that's going to happen a decent amount during the group stage. I think their read is going to be, we don't have a good way to win this normally, so let's just all in for the early game. And that's really not a good strategy if you're the less talented team, in my opinion. So I think that EG is kind of doomed, but I'm hopeful that they'll pull something off, so I bet $20 on them. And again, it's a hedge against Damwon because I do think Damwon gets out of this group. So with Damwon, we have Nuguri, we have Canyon, Showmaker, Deokdam, and Kellen. I think that Nuguri is a very good top laner. I don't really, Aatrox doesn't stand out as one of his best champions in my mind. I always just think of him as a Kennen player, and we've seen Kennen pop up at play-ins, so that could be a very good thing for Damwon. He's a very good flanker in the top lane. And then, playing Aatrox, I'm sure he could play Aatrox against the top laners in his group, but I don't think it's going to be a huge advantage for him to do so. Canyon, one of the best junglers in the world, he can kind of play anything. I think for that reason, they should really be banning the Maokai and picking carry junglers as often as possible. If this goes back to a Graves meta, then Canyon's going to be nuts. Showmaker is a roaming mid laner. He can play the carry, but he generally is a roamer. And then Deokdam and Kellen, I think this is a good opportunity for Deokdam and Kellen to kind of show why they moved on from Ghost. The funny thing is that Ghost and Beryl might have actually been a good bot lane in this meta. But I still have high hopes for Damwon. I think that, we're not going to see we're probably not going to see the flashy Tristana plays from Deokdam. But, we'll see. G2, I don't have a lot of hope for G2 here. I'm not a G2 fan. Broken Blade, Yonkos, Caps, and then who's their bot lane? It's getting late. Yeah, Flocket and Targamas. Targamas is interesting. He's an interesting player. I really don't like Flocket, so I think that'll be the big limitation here. I think that EG could beat G2. I know that didn't work out that way last time. I think that they're in a better spot from a draft perspective because Danny's not there. Danny was kind of baiting the team. It was not Danny's fault. It was the coach's fault. But having Danny, they were playing Seraphine bot a lot. I really think they'll just move away from that against a team like G2 if they play them again. Caps can kind of do anything in the mid lane. Yonkos should be picking Maokai. So this is the kind of spot where when G2 plays Evil Geniuses is just going to be okay, take Maokai, take Aatrox, take whatever champions you want. We're going to play something else, and EG is just going to probably get stomped because their coach doesn't know how to draft. But I think that this is a spot where people should be kind of more on the EG side. because like the public perception is that G2 is much better than Evil Geniuses. I just really don't think that's the case. And now with JDG, we're kind of getting to the point where JDG is overrated. I love JDG. I want them to win. I want them to win Worlds. Kanavi is arguably the best player in the world, one of the best junglers in the world for sure. Watching Kanavi against Canyon is going to be awesome. Watching Canyon or Kanavi against Inspired is going to be really cool as well. I think that Inspired can do pretty well, or surprisingly well. But that's going to be a really great test for him. And he's the kind of guy where I think if they beat him pretty badly at Worlds, he'll be able to kind of take that as a learning opportunity. I think Inspired this year has been kind of amazing from like a mentality perspective. In the mid lane, Yagao I think is really not a very good mid laner. I think that Showmaker is much better than him. I think that JoJo could actually have some really good matchups against Yagao. What's going to happen is Evil Geniuses is going to let Yagao play Victor or Zoe every single game. So unless they have a great strategy against that, they can just draft themselves into a corner again. And then we have Hope and Missing in the bot lane. They're a good bot lane. I think that they are probably the best bot lane in this group, but they're not one of the better bot lanes at this tournament. There's at least 3 or 4 bot lanes that are much better, in my opinion. I think that Damwon is the best team in this group. I know it hasn't looked like that for a long time, but they've been to back-to-back Worlds Finals, and their talent is just ridiculous. I would expect them to overperform. Group C, we have DRX, GAM, Rogue, and Top Esports. I'm not going to spend much time on this one. I think that DRX and Top Esports are much better than Rogue and GAM. I don't know anything about GAM, and it really doesn't matter to me. If they end up coming out of this group, then cool, but I can't pretend like I know anything about them, so I'm just going to go based off of what I know, or at least what I think I know. And I think that DRX is still underrated. I think that they're very good. They could win this group outright against Top Esports. Wayward, Tian, Knight, Jackie Love. I mean, they're a bunch of very good players. But DRX is very good players as well. I mean, with Rogue, I don't believe in Rogue kind of at all. I just threw $20 on them because it's $20. And I'm like hedging against not having them because I'm not going to bet on the anything that's less than like plus 900. I don't even really want to bet on RNG at this point. I'd basically be breaking even. So for this group, I really just think that DRX and Top Esports will get out. I don't have any reason to think that Rogue can get out. For DRX, I think that, yes, they can play Aatrox in the jungle. I think that they probably will end up playing Maokai. They've shown a propensity of moving towards like Sejuani, Poppy, Maokai, and kind of playing more around Zika and Deft, which is definitely a viable strategy. But there will be times where they should really just play through Pyosik and put him on carry champions. Like if Graves is actually a viable champion again, they should just pick Graves every single game and force the other teams to prove they can beat it. Because, Pyosik is like just that good of a jungler. Then in the mid lane, Zika should be carrying more often than roaming. I don't want to see them roaming. I don't want to see them playing Galio. I don't want to see them playing Twisted Fate. Just give them a carry champion. In the bot lane, utility or hyper carry. Deft can do everything. So that's basically it. I mean, I think the one thing is that Beryl is also very good with pocket picks as a support, so they have a ton of flexibility in draft. That's going to be a big benefit for them in the group stage. For Top Esports, Wayward can play both sides of that matchup. I think that Tian is a jungler that kind of should go for the Maokai. I think if it is like a Graves meta, Tian is not a great Graves player. I think that was one of like those splits that was the worst for him, was when it was farm jungle meta, and then like he had all these like health issues and stuff. In the mid lane, Jackie Love can play. Knight can play anything, but he's better when he's the carry. And then in the bot lane, Jackie Love's a psychopath, so I'm excited to watch him play. I think that he'll get out of this no problem, but there's also a high likelihood that he will kind of play too aggressive at some point against a strong AD carry, and it's going to cost his team. But you need to take risk, and he has no problem doing that. I think that DRX again is the team that I would bet on in this group, because I think you are getting value. I think that it's basically a 50-50 between DRX and Top Esports. They should both be able to take care of Gam and Rogue. So then it comes down to how do they play against one another. And I think that it's a very close matchup. So I would definitely take DRX there. Then in Group D, we have 100 Thieves, Flying Oyster, Gen.G, and RNG. I don't believe in 100 Thieves at all. I think that someday can play Aatrox, can play both sides of the matchup, but not against the best top laners in the world. I think that Closer is a very overrated jungler at this point. I think that this is probably a good group for him, because I think Wei is overrated. So Closer might be the second best jungler in this group. I don't know anything about Flying Oyster, so I'm not even going to talk about them. Abbedagga can play carries, and he can play roam. So I think that in this matchup against a player like Chovy, you'll probably want to roam, and against a player like Xiaohu, you'll probably want to try to play a carry, just that you have a good power level and can scale if RNG has the tempo advantage throughout the game. I don't have any faith in the bot lane, FBI and Huhi. They are okay for North American standards, but I think that they're not going to be able to force the issue against Ruler, and they're not going to be able to punish like Gala. So, I don't have much hope for 100 Thieves at all. Flying Oyster, I don't know anything about them. Gen.G, one of the tournament favorites. And then RNG, I've talked about a decent amount in other videos. Some people might sour on them a little bit if they drop a game to Gen.G or 100 Thieves. Like, it's definitely possible for RNG to do that, but I think by the end of the group, they'll end up in, second place, most likely. So that's basically it. I mean, I guess the question would be for Gen.G, how do they fit into the meta? I think that Doran can play the carry top laners, but he's not really, an exceptional top laner from a carry perspective. Peanut, one of the best carry junglers in the world. But it's funny because it's not when there's really strong farming champions. He's good at Nidalee, but he's not the best Graves player. I think it's more it'll probably end up making more sense for them to ban the Maokai, put Peanut onto a carry champion, put Doran onto something that can go 50-50 in the top lane. So probably also, play around the Aatrox, probably ban Aatrox, and then get Chovy onto something that can carry, and then just let bot lane scale, and they should be able to take care of everybody in their group stage. And most matchups, I think, are going to be tough for other people to kind of take advantage of their team. In order to beat Gen.G, you really need to have a strong top laner that can force the issue against Doran, and then draft well. So there's only a handful of teams that can kind of do that consistently. So that's basically my thoughts on the upcoming group stage. I'll probably make another video during the group stage, just once we see a couple of matchups and get more clarity on the meta. That's basically it. I'm excited. I think that it's been a great tournament so far. I think that DRX and Damwon are the two teams that I'm going to be rooting for the heaviest. And that's basically it. And also, obviously, North America. I like Evil Geniuses a lot. I like their organization. But that's basically it. A lot of information in that one. Hope you enjoyed it. Let me know in the comment section who you think is going to win Worlds and who's going to surprise us during the group stage. But again, thanks for watching. And I'll talk to you later.